Hi, welcome back to CVC Interviews. My name is Joyce Vaudrey from Vernon, and I'm here today with Leah Juliett, and we're continuing a conversation we had earlier. We'd like to let you know more about this very interesting person and everything she's been up to. Leah, thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So earlier we were talking about your journey to the Miss Greater Rockville and part of the Miss America pageant circuit. And you talked about the fact you had two platforms. Most people know that someone from the pageant era has to have a platform. And what are your two platforms for Miss America, and how does that lead us into our next segment?
Right. So in the Miss America organization, we call them social impact initiatives, which is the same thing as a platform, but it usually has to do with a prominent social issue. So my first one is safety, security, accessibility, freedom, and equity for transgender youth, which we spoke a lot about in the last segment. And my second one is March Against Revenge Porn, which is the nonprofit that I've run since the age of 19. And I look forward to being able to speak with you more about that today.
Excellent. I'm very curious to hear about it. One of the things I'm curious to hear about is you recently received an award. It is the L'Oreal Women of Worth.
Yes.
And what did you win that award for?
Sure. So L'Oreal is, one of the most widely recognized makeup conglomerates in the world, and it has a philanthropic program called Women of Worth that's been around for the past 15 years. And every year they choose 10 women who are doing incredible work in their communities. And each woman wins $10,000 for their organization and has the ability to win an additional $25,000 through national voting. So anyone can vote for which of the 10 women wins the additional $25,000. So as a winner, I have the opportunity to win $35,000 for my organization. And I won this award, this honor that I'm incredibly fortunate to have gotten from my work with March Against Revenge Porn. I started March Against Revenge Porn when I was 19. It's an international digital advocacy nonprofit that aims to combat the abhorrent practice of cybersexual exploitation and image abuse through civil rights marches, a legal defense fund, victim support services, a podcast, media advocacy. We do a lot across the board, but the goal of what we're doing is to ensure that victims in the United States and abroad have a voice that has been traditionally taken from them by this abhorrent crime.
So I'm curious, so it's not illegal to post naked pictures of your exes?
In the state of Connecticut, it's illegal, and it's illegal in 46 states and the District of Columbia. However, each state is different. Each law is different. Some laws are much more strong than others. Some laws certainly need to be amended because they truly let perpetrators get away with absolutely terrible, terrible crimes. But there's no federal legislation. So through the March Against Revenge Porn, we actively seek to pass legislation federally that will criminalize the crime of image abuse. You were saying posting naked pictures of an ex online. That's an example of what's called revenge porn, but there's a plethora of other ways that this happens, including hidden cams, when an individual will hide a camera in a woman's restroom and take videos and pictures of her and then post them to the internet, or sextortion, when an individual may record an individual through their laptop camera without knowing and then force them to pay a sum of money, or else they'll post the pictures and send them to their family and coworkers. There's many ways that this crime happens. The through line is that images and videos are used to abuse individuals who are vulnerable because of their bodies or because of their gender. This disproportionately happens to women, it disproportionately happens to LGBTQ folks, and it disproportionately happens to young people. So this is a crime that affects people across the board. It can affect people of any gender, any race, any sexual orientation, but it disproportionately affects people who are already at a heightened risk of sexual violence victimization. And it absolutely has to stop.
I couldn't agree more. How do you see, what is your vision? You're not necessarily going to be able to stop everything, but there is a way to dissuade people with stronger legislation. So what do you see as the ideal federal law that could be passed?
Well, the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, which is a wonderful organization, another nonprofit that deals with this crime, but deals with it in the individuals who run the organization are all lawyers and academics, and they've drafted some wonderful examples of what should be federal legislation. It needs to be a qualified domestic violence related offense. I believe it needs to be a qualified human trafficking related offense, because so often victims whose images end up online end up being trafficked. It needs to be a hate crime, because so often victims are LGBTQ+ or are Black and brown and are targeted because of their race or their sexual orientation and gender identity. And I believe that it needs to penalize perpetrators by ensuring that there is a maximum penalty, a minimum penalty of time served for each image that is published on the internet, and as well as large fines to deter and ensure that there's no recidivism. So I think that in the state of Connecticut, it's currently called unlawful dissemination of an intimate image, and it can be upgraded to a felony based on how many times the perpetrator commits the crime. But I think it needs to be a felony from the first get-go.
Yeah, it just takes one image and
to
it's
destroy
around the world.
someone's life.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
all it takes, yeah.
So there's so much that goes into writing a piece of legislation, and Kamala Harris, who is our Vice President-elect, was one of the authors of the Enough Act, which is the piece of legislation that is in the Senate currently that would criminalize revenge porn. It hasn't been passed, but I think that under a Biden-Harris administration it could be passed, and it absolutely needs to be, because, a victim in New Jersey and a victim in Connecticut are no different. Based on, state lines and borders, they're going to have different access to justice. It's absolutely unfair and unjust. And so having a federal law gives people equal access to justice across the board. And I think that that's imperative.
Where, if any, do the platforms come into this? The Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those. So how is that? Is that part of the platform, or are you focusing more on the law of the individual who commits the crime?
So March Against Revenge Porn works in every aspect of revenge porn perpetration. So we do work specifically with victims by, helping them seek lawyers and legal justice and figure out what their circumstances are and what they can do. We are offering $500 grants to them to help seek legal justice. We hold our marches to, alert the media that this is happening. I go on places like CNN and BBC to talk. So we do a lot across the board. One of the main things that I think is important to know is that this happens not only on image boards that house naked pictures of people like 4chan and Reddit. This happens on our typically used social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. The most commonly used ones that I've seen are Instagram and Facebook because they are photo sharing sites. When I was a young teenager, an individual posted a Instagram page called Woke It Sluts and posted nude pictures of underage girls in my high school on this Instagram page, and it was over 24 hours before the page was taken down. It takes less than 24 hours to ruin someone's life. So lives were ruined before the page was taken down, and Instagram was not held accountable. Unfortunately, the boy who I believe the boy wasn't held accountable either. I don't know exactly what happened in that scenario because I was much too young to fully understand the crime, and it was before I was an advocate. Facebook is used often, Facebook groups, Facebook Messenger. People send photos like trading cards, and it's awful. And the platforms are not held accountable. So these platforms need to ensure that they have procedures to identify non-consensual photos, to have people report the photos and have them taken down immediately, instead of people waiting, biting their nails, waiting, wondering who else is going to get a hold of their pictures, sitting on the edge of their seats, suicidal on the edge of life and death because of just how horrific this crime is. And I think that the social media companies are definitely to blame for the slow pace at which it takes to hold perpetrators accountable for using their platforms to host these images.
I would agree with you. I'd also like to know, how would someone begin if they just found out they were a victim of this revenge? how do you start the process of getting things taken down, or do you have to file a police report? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you can do. There's a lot of options, and I like to tell people that there's a lot of options because when I was victimized by this, I didn't think there was any options. The only thing that I found on the internet that even had anything to do with what I was going through was the story of a young person who'd committed suicide because of being victimized. So when the only thing you hear about is someone, you know, losing their life because of a crime, you think that that is my only path too. But it's not. Not only are there organizations like March Against Revenge Porn who, you know, will talk to you and talk you through it and point you in the direction of your best options. Of course, we are not lawyers, so this is non-legal advice that we're providing, but we talk in an empathetic way as all people who have gone through this and experienced this as victims, and potentially provide, you know, a grant to seek legal justice and things like that. There are other organizations like the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, which offers a 24/7 crisis helpline. They can talk you through what to do if you're being victimized as well. There are lawyers who offer pro bono services. The first thing that I would do if I found out that I was being victimized today was to make sure I'm taking screenshots of everything, whether it be the messages of the perpetrator threatening to post your images or the images themselves and the URL that they're being posted on. You want to make sure you have as much proof as possible, because when you do take this to the police and file a police report, which I recommend you do if it's illegal in your state, or do it anyway, because hopefully soon we'll have federal legislation, even if you don't have a law in your state.
It can be reported, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can still report it, and there's other avenues of seeking justice. Make sure that you save that information. Because
so the documentation from the moment, everything you can possibly gather.
Right.
Even writing down the day and date you found it.
Oh, exactly.
URL, the screenshot, the photos. Did I tell you I take pictures with my phone to get a screenshot of a computer? but writing down the URL is very important also.
Absolutely. It's completely necessary, because otherwise you won't have proof. And although these images do, you know, live in cyberspace, and many people say what's in cyberspace lives forever, sometimes, you know, an individual may get them taken down, or the website itself may get raided by the police and taken down. You still want to have proof that someone, you know, violated you in this way, so that way you can have your day in court, like so many victims don't get. Everyone deserves their day in court to be able to seek justice. And so making sure that you write everything down and take screenshots and have proof is the first way that you can eventually get there.
It's very important to gather as much information as possible, because whether or not it's illegal in your state, you still want it to be reported.
Absolutely.
And documented.
Absolutely. That's the best way that you can get justice as a victim.
And you mentioned, besides your own webpage, your webpage is marchagainstrevengeporn.org.
Yes.
Which we will have up on the screen. But also Cyber Civil Rights Initiative. Is that a national or a local organization?
Yeah, that's another national organization. I believe that was founded in 2012 by Holly Jacobs, who was one of the first victims of revenge porn to start speaking out and telling her story. And she was also recognized as a L'Oreal Woman of Worth in 2018. So we are very fortunate to have recognition nationally from L'Oreal for the subject of revenge porn and cyber civil rights.
And have you met up with some of the folks from that organization, or is it more of a mutual professional arrangement that you have, that you help each other out?
Yeah, you know, we've all communicated. We've spoken many times, and because they're located in Florida and I'm located in Connecticut, I've never been able to physically meet them. But we very much respect one another's work, and I definitely think that the work that they're doing is needed, and I hope that they think the same about my organization.
Well, I think L'Oreal kind of agrees with you, so you know, that's a stamp of approval.
Yes.
I mean, 1 of 10 out of hundreds of thousands of women that are doing community service, organizations, helping people. That's a great achievement.
Thank you.
To be recognized. Now, marchagainstrevengeporn.org, is that considered just a local, or are you branching out further beyond the Connecticut area?
Oh, no, we're international.
Oh, you're international.
So we've hosted civil rights marches across the Brooklyn Bridge in Orlando, in Pittsburgh, and in Boston. We have one in Los Angeles coming up in 2021, one in Washington, D.C., and one in Minneapolis in 2021 as well. And we work with victims across the world. So most recently, I've worked with victims in India, Mexico, the UK, and all 50 states. So we talk to victims every day from around the world, and we won't stop even when revenge porn is criminalized federally, which I have confidence that it will be. We won't stop until we help as many people as we can, because this crime really can affect your life deeply. It affected mine, and I want to make sure that anyone who's being victimized has a voice, has a pathway to justice, and has the knowledge that not only are they not alone, but they deserve to live a long, happy, fruitful life outside of this victimization.
It's a wonderful message. The pathway out, I think, is critically important. People just don't know where to go. They might have a great support system who understand what they're going through, but how do you deal with getting from, okay, this just happened to me, to fixing it as best you can? So you guys at March Against Revenge Porn, even though the title is March Against, that's just a piece of what you folks do.
Right.
So if someone wanted to volunteer or help your organization, is there a way to donate funds for traveling, or if it was what if you're an attorney and you wanted to do pro bono work? Can you access you or other people through that?
Yeah, so there's so much that you can do. The first is that we help victims by turning them into advocates. Whether you're taking the streets with us in a protest march as a victim or as an ally, or you're telling your story on our podcast, or you are a recipient of one of our $500 grants to help you seek legal justice, we are turning you into advocates, into storytellers, into unapologetically free and liberated people, because liberated people are dangerous people, because we have stories to tell. That's a Nadia Bowles-Weber iteration on her quote. As far as what people can do to help, you can donate to our legal defense fund at marchagainstrevengeporn.org/donate. We would certainly be open to having conversations with lawyers about representing victims who come to us with pro bono work. We're also accepting applications for our board of directors. We have interviews coming up, but we will accept applications at any time, and that's on our website where you can apply to join our team. We also have internship applications. There's so many ways to get involved. It really is an organization that works across the board in many different facets to get victims justice. And the top way that we do that is by turning them into advocates and allowing them to tell their stories. When I was first victimized at age 14, I didn't have a place to go. I didn't want anyone to know what had happened to me. And now the whole world knows what has happened to me, because as soon as you type in my name into Google, my story comes up, and that is a method of strength for me. Being unapologetic, unashamed, unabashed in who I am gives me so much empowerment, and it makes me want to stay alive. It makes me want to help others, and it makes me want to continue telling my story.
Well, I think you have a lot to say. So I think being able to speak up and to go from maybe a shy, retiring middle school, high school student to someone who can take a national platform.
Checking out the website, seeing what you can be a part of based on your skills, and reaching out to me. You can contact me at Leah at marchagainstrevengeporn.org, which is my email address, and I will answer your email, and we can see how we can connect.
Excellent. And when is your first march?
So we haven't chosen the exact date yet of our upcoming march in Los Angeles, but we believe it's going to be in the summer, and our Washington, D.C. march is going to be in March. And our Minneapolis march, we believe, will be in the fall of next year. This is all pending the next wave of COVID, so Right. It may not happen. But in the meantime, we're doing a series called March Against Revenge Porn, March Across America, which is a podcast that we started. Our first person that we interviewed was former Congresswoman Katie Hill. who was victimized by revenge porn last year. And we tell the stories of people from all 50 states who are being victimized by revenge porn, what that looks like for them, how they are seeking justice, and how legislation works in their states. So we're kind of doing a virtual march across America in place of a physical march this year. But we've marched in 4 states and we are not stopping. So I'm very excited.
Which state have you had the most success in being welcomed?
Marching across the Brooklyn Bridge was probably my favorite. New York, of course, is so welcoming, and it's right down the road from Connecticut. So that was a wonderful experience. But literally marching across the iconic Brooklyn Bridge with my family, with my friends, with my sister, with victims and allies, strangers, marching across that bridge was such a phenomenal full circle moment that happened in 2017. And then a little bit after that march, I was contacted by the office of Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City, who informed me that he was criminalizing revenge porn in New York. So I don't believe that I was the only cause of this, but I do believe that through marching we shed light on this issue and perhaps moved the needle a little bit that led to the legislation being passed. So New York has done so many wonderful things, and I was really, really fortunate that our first march took place in New York City.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
To get a mayor to admit and to say, all right, it's going to make it illegal. I think that's where most people come from. My reaction, too, is, what do you mean that's not illegal?
Yeah.
So I'd like to think the politicians will say, what do you mean that's not illegal, and what can I do about it?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's many politicians, more on the conservative side than the liberal side, I would say, who believe that posting images is a form of free speech, and that, limiting someone's free speech by saying that they can't post those images is, a form of censorship. I personally think that that's ridiculous, and that type of thinking is damaging and dehumanizing and abusive to those who are victimized by this crime, like myself. So I personally think that that is baloney. But it's something that is, it's a line of thinking that is supported by many in the political sphere. So I think by telling our stories, you can refuse to support a piece of legislation, but you can't refuse to admit that what happened to me, and that I deserve justice as a victim, and that someone like me deserves justice. So I think by telling our stories to people in power, that's the best way that we can make sure that that legislation gets passed. That's what I did when I went to the Connecticut General Assembly. I spoke in front of the Sentencing Commission, and I asked them to amend Connecticut's law to increase the penalties for perpetrators. And fortunately, they did it. And I think that the reason that they did it was because I told my story, and I didn't leave anything out. Like I was speaking of before, I talked about the raw, the ugly, the gross parts that nobody wants to talk about. The fact that there were naked pictures of me on the internet when I was 14 years old. And that, almost killed me. It literally almost killed me. But talking about it is the only thing that's going to change the narrative. And so I don't expect everyone to feel comfortable talking about it, but because I do talk about it and I'm privileged and I have this platform, I want to use it for good. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
I appreciate the fact you recognize that you're in a position to speak out, and you have that strength and obviously the family support, your partner's support. You got everybody's support.
Yeah.
Others may not have that. So they can use you as a sounding board or their own mouthpiece until they're able to feel strong enough.
Right, exactly. I mean, I recognize the fact that I'm a person of economic privilege. I'm white. I have a background of support from my family, and that's something that so many victims don't have. And so I have to recognize that privilege, first of all. I'm a non-binary person, but there are Black trans women being murdered across this country every day, and they might not ever have the opportunity to, speak on CNN like I have. And, not only it's not just because I'm speaking out and using my voice, it's because there is a lot of privilege that comes with being a white person and, being a person of economic empowerment. And so I can't not bring that up. I might not have the same opportunities if I wasn't born the way that I was fortunate enough to be born. That's
a very good point, to point out the fact that you do have it's very common right now to hear that phrase, white privilege, but when you stop to think about it, I mean, I can go back and think about times where I was pulled over for speeding and the officer was like, well, just slow it down, little lady.
Yeah.
You know, and the more I think about it, the more I realize I probably would have been arrested that night if I wasn't who I was.
Yeah, exactly.
And simply being white was what got me at 2 o'clock in the morning to slow it down, little lady. So yeah, there's a lot of little stories like that that I stop now and think, wow, that's white privilege. And just didn't recognize it.
Exactly. People trusted a 19-year-old person to go on national television and talk about revenge porn, literally, probably because of the privilege that I have. Like, it's deeply unfortunate. So I take that privilege and I use it to help amplify the voices of those who don't have the same megaphone that I do.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and letting us be one of your megaphones.
Thank you.
I would like to encourage everyone to please check out her webpage, marchagainstrevengeporn.org, and Leah has it updated pretty often, and it's very informative. And would like to ask you to do what you can to help out, even if it's just being accepting and open to someone who comes to you and says something terrible has happened to them, and steer them in the direction of Leah Juliett and follow her lead, and hopefully becoming an advocate instead of a victim. Thank you again for joining us. Here at CVC, we like to tell stories that uplift and inform and highlight what those of us in our own community are doing. So if you have a story you'd like to tell or be a part of the CVC community, contact us at cvcct.org and check out our webpage. Thank you for joining us. This is Joyce Vaudrey saying good night.